Welcome to the Perfect Pairing Podcast. The cigar of the week this week is the FP Toro Gordo Habano.
My name is Chris, and I am a cigar noob and a whiskey expert.
And my name is Adam, and I am a cigar expert, but a whiskey noob.
And today, with this FP Cigars Habano, we are pairing Morris Single Malt Muscat Barrel Australian Single Malt, Maker's Mark number 46, and Russell's Reserve 10-year bourbon.
This is a wide mix. I know I'm a whiskey noob, but I feel like this is a little bit a different. So which is good. We're gonna find a lot of things here.
Yes, I'm actually really excited to see how these pairings go. I did cast a wide net, as you indicate, and as you know, a couple of these were last minute subs because I felt like I learned some stuff from those last episodes we recorded, and I was like, I want to try some stuff and see what happens. So
Nice.
maybe I learned something, maybe I didn't. We'll see.
I like it though. It's a good test, and that's really what this whole thing's about, is testing and figuring out your own palate, what things work and what things definitely didn't, and just having fun with it. So this is everybody at home. You're going to do the same thing we're doing right now, hopefully.
Yep, exactly. There's a lot to be learned. I'm certain it's going to take a lot of episodes before I know how to nail down our pairings. But the good news is, if something doesn't pair right for us and for our taste buds, hopefully somebody listening is like, well, I actually really liked that pairing. So
Right.
I'm sure we'll have some of those.
Everything's going to be different. All right, here's a pop quiz for you. Let's see if we can get that. Yeah. What is this cut called?
Oh, is this the trivia question specifically, or is this just a pop quiz for fun?
Ooh, I forgot about the trivia. This is the trivia question. We'll leave it there.
You didn't forget about it. It was just planned like that.
Bingo. Yeah, it's just natural reaction. All right, everybody. Sorry, guys, listening can't hear it, but it is a V cut, and then perpendicular to that V cut, I did another V cut. What is this cut called?
All right, I don't know that one, so I'm gonna learn something today.
Nice.
All right. Let me, as we get lit up here, talk about our first pairing, because this is a newer whiskey to me, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to try it with this cigar. So this is Morris Australian Single Malt. This is not just their flagship bottle, though. I like their flagship bottle. I think it's good. But this bottle, they finish it in Muscat barrels. I think it's pronounced Muscat. I've heard it a couple different ways. And it gives it this fruity flavor that is really interesting. And I really want to see how that interacts with a cigar, because we haven't had something super fruity yet. So I'm excited to see how that goes.
I'm not going to lie. I totally read it musket. I was like, it's not a musket barrel, like, a gun.
Right.
It's an actual wooden barrel.
I think I might have heard somebody say musket online. I was looking it up, and it was one of those where I was like, well, let me look it up and see how it's pronounced. And then
put this away from the mic.
And then everybody pronounced it differently. So I was like, well, I think it's muscat. Muscat? But then I sound like I'm saying muskrat, like the rodent.
Or
so I don't really know.
Scat, which is just poop.
Yeah, or that. It's not
musky scat. Even worse.
Even worse. Musky.
Sorry, Morris. We're not helping you guys out here, are we?
Yeah. I promise you, it doesn't taste anything like that. It has a neat flavor. This is going to be definitely a new one for you, at least based on what we've had on the podcast. This will be a new type of flavor. So
I don't believe I've ever had an Australian single malt. I have had an American single malt, but not an Australian one.
Yes, it's Australian single malts have been around, I think, decently longer than American. Surprisingly, they've been doing it for a while. I just never got into them, and so I'm excited to learn more about them. This is the second one that I've had, and once again, I was a fan of it. So we'll see.
I think I'm getting a lot of that fruitiness on the nose. That is, whoa! My FP cigar is nice and smoky, so I'm like trying not to inhale the smoke in my nose, but that smell is super interesting.
Yeah, I think I can't even think of what we've had on here that would be close. Like the Monkey Shoulder was a Scotch, so it was made with malted barley as well.
Right.
So it's going to have a similar malty taste, but aside from that, this is pretty different.
And I gotta say, first couple puffs on this FP Habano, I mean, just delicious, very, very easy draw, very. I mean, you guys can see the burn lines already perfect, which in the beginning is not very common on occasion from time to time with cigars. So,
Wow, yeah. It's been a while since I've had a cigar with this type of a profile. I forgot how much I liked it. I've been doing a lot of the sweet but darker cigars.
hmm.
This is like sweet but kind of lighter, a little bit more like bready, baking
Oh yeah.
spice. Wow. I'm a fan so far.
No, I just took whoa. My first sip of this Morris was very interesting. It was definitely on the heavier side. You could tell it's single malt. Um, but I got on the back end the fruitiness. I went, as everybody should know by now, because of course you guys have been watching the hundreds of episodes we've released. Um, I always go from cigar to whiskey, back to the cigar. So I took a puff, went to the whiskey, felt like it eliminated anything I got from the cigar. But when I went back to the cigar, that was like mind blown.
I haven't gone back to the cigar yet. I'm getting a good palate for this whiskey because once again, I've only had this a couple times, and then I'm going to
Mhm.
dive back into this cigar. But I did puff the cigar a couple times to get it going, and then went to the whiskey, and it did bring out some body. I would say I think this is going to have one of the lowest or most mellow bodies of the ones we're going to have today, but that
Really?
cigar brought it out pretty nicely. I mean, it filled my mouth with flavor. That was surprising to me.
Yeah. I'm I'm gonna let your face just be so shocked by how that taste of that cigar when you go back. Everybody just stare right at Chris's face right now. I mean, there's a burst of flavor, explosion.
And it's so different than it was. Holy cow.
Yeah,
What does
and not
that reminds me of something?
and I don't think it's in a bad way, which is interesting, right? Because this we like the cigar, it changes completely, and we still like it, which is sometimes a great thing with pairings, right? And of course, if you find a good cigar, it'll be able to adapt and live with a lot of different pairings.
Yeah, I think it's because you've got this. This is a very early half-cocked explanation, but you've kind of got this spicy toast flavor of the cigar, which is still there, but
Hmm.
the whiskey introduces this stone fruit, apricot, dried fruit note. I say this about whiskey sometimes. It reminds me of like a jam or a preserves on like a toast. It's like a real nice, they interact in a real nice way.
Okay, I think I'm getting that. My palate is not as refined as yours in general. You just always go a little. I'm like, dang, like apricot. Okay, oh yeah.
I
I'm like,
just send it, you know.
that's
If
good.
something
I
reminds
like
me of
it.
something, I go for it, you know.
Yeah, like we talked about last time, is that's really what it's all about. Is
Hmm.
your memory and just saying this reminds me of X, and there is no wrong answer
Yeah.
unless you say apricot. So.
What I do like is I like the vanilla creaminess that this cigar has. It goes away for a minute when you're coming right off the whiskey, but then it's like 2 or 3 puffs later, it's back again, and I'm getting
Mhm.
that nice creaminess again, which I'm enjoying.
The question is, what type of pairing is this?
All right, let me take a guess. I'm gonna do one more sip and then puff,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna say what I think it is, maybe.
I've got an idea. It's very interesting. Overall, no matter what we want to call it, at least for me, everybody, I like it. I'm a fan. I would do this again for sure. I would say if you're a fast drinker, or you tend to not just wet your tongue with a scotch or a single malt, this would be interesting because it might overpower the cigar as you go along. But if you just let that, single malt kind of just roll over your tongue and you take your time with it, I think it's beautiful.
Definitely. Definitely. I think this could go either way depending on your perspective. So this could be, I think it's okay for me. This is an ultra pairing because when I go back to the cigar, it tastes like something I can't even. I've had this. Well, I've tried the
Right.
cigar first. I've had this whiskey before. I'm not getting whatever that flavor is when I go whiskey then cigar. That is something totally different for me.
And you're not getting you wouldn't have been able to get that flavor out of the whiskey either, ever?
I don't think so. Now, once again, I'm newer to this whiskey, but I don't think so.
Fair. I mean, if we found two ultra pairings that fast, I mean, you're just spoiled because that is not common.
It could be that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's always an
it's,
option.
it's the it's the cigar noob coming out of him, everybody. It's okay.
Yeah. Yep, that could be.
No, I mean, I'm thinking I'm leaning more towards antagonistic, but only because maybe just like you, I don't know this whiskey very well, right? I don't know what it should have been. Um, so that could be a little bit why I'm leaning towards the cigar changing so much that I think that was the real differentiator in the two. So I said, all right, the cigar is changing a lot. The whiskey's not doing a whole lot. I'm getting a lot of antagonist here.
Okay, so now would you say, let me ask this then, because there's kind of a line that I think is great for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the whiskey tastes pretty close to the same, but when I go back to the cigar, I get a flavor that I haven't gotten from the whiskey or the cigar. But because the whiskey hasn't changed, would you say that's more antagonistic then? Because
I would
only the cigar is changing?
probably lean that way. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say
So,
like ultra's kind of like I was eating pizza and with ranch, and then now I'm not getting pizza or ranch.
okay.
Like,
Okay.
what is happening? It just created this fusion of craziness in
Okay.
both
I will
ways.
withdraw my ultra then because I agree that the whiskey's still pretty similar.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, this cigar, look at this burn.
Yeah.
That ash is so solid. This is just a delicious cigar. I'll admit to everybody, just so you guys know, I am in like a Habano kick right now. So
Mm.
maybe that's a little bit of what this is. I'm just like, I'm enjoying this. But
I have not been on a Habano kick, but I'm enjoying this because of that. Because I've
right.
been on like some darker wrappers, some chocolatey type cigars, and this is a breath of fresh air. And for those who do like a single malt with a fruity finish, if that's like your thing, the good news is it's not changing very much, but it does complement the cigar so nicely. This is a very, very good pairing.
And I think the cigar is really approachable with this pairing too. If you're new to cigars, I think this is a great pairing to start off with. You're going to feel very comfortable with that single malt in your hand. You're going to feel very comfortable on your palate with that single malt because you know what it does, you know what to expect. But when you add this cigar, it's not anything crazy. It's very approachable with this single malt. I think it would be a good beginner pairing if you're coming from the whiskey side.
Totally, totally. Sometimes the darker stuff will still for me kind of be a little bit harsh and it'll burn my nose, it'll burn my nasal
Right.
cavity a little bit, my tongue will dry out a little bit. This is not that. This is smooth and easy and approachable for sure.
Yep, 100% agree.
Okay, I'm excited. Let's get into this Maker's 46. I'm going to pour some up here.
Make 'em make us.
We'll see what happens. This one for me was a little bit of a curveball of a pairing. I was kind of like, I just want to see what happens. So, Maker's Mark number 46, for those listening who don't know, this is not just Maker's Mark because sometimes you call, what is it, Jack Daniels, you call it Old Number 7, which is just their flagship bottle, their standard
Right.
recipe. Maker's Mark is just called Maker's Mark. So, Maker's Mark number 46 is a different bottle. What they do is they take the Maker's Mark bourbon and they finish it with French oak staves. And that totally changes the flavor profile. I'm not a big fan of Makers. I'm a very big fan of Makers number 46. And I know multiple people who are that way. So you can see on the bottle, you don't just, for those watching the video version, you don't just have the Makers, it also says number 46. So just to be clear, because they look pretty similar. They used to be in very different bottles and then they
Mm.
changed it. So
Now, what's the price difference?
Not much. I want to say like $10. I
Huh.
think normal makers is in your mid 20s and then 46 is in your mid 30s. And I would personally move up to 46 all day long. I normal maker's mark is decent, but 46 is like for me it's a more exceptional pour.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I switched it this time around. Started with the makers.
Mhm.
That was super smooth, and then I felt this like peppery kind of harshness on the end, which was interesting. Um, but it was still like I can feel just my saliva. Like there was a burst of flavor right away. That was I still I got to go back to it to target it. But would you say it has that little bite, I guess, at the end?
For sure compared to the single malt. I think if you compare it to the Russells that we're about to have, probably not so much, but coming off of that single malt, 100%.
Okay.
100% it's got more of a spice kick to it. We're kind of working our way up because I don't want to burn out our palates
Yeah.
with the Russells in the beginning.
Fair enough. Hmm. Delicious. So I'm still trying to nail that first note. I feel like I'm getting those staves like very prominent. And maybe it's because I've had makers a lot, just the normal one. I've
Mhm.
had this one, I think, maybe two or three times. And maybe that's why it's just popping out because my memory is saying, we've had this before. And then it goes, whoa, what is that? We
Yes.
haven't had that before.
Yeah, and as somebody who's had both, then I feel like you could definitely testify to this. They're pretty different than each other. You might think they taste exactly the same, but they really don't.
Hmm. Which is weird because I feel like normal makers is the almost the opposite. Well, I don't know. It's been a while since I had the normal makers. I've actually had this more recently.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it's the staves. I think it's just in my head and I'm like I can't get out of the staves and I'm like, yep, that's what I'm getting.
I mean, it comes through strong. You get like this oaky, sweet flavor from those seared staves. I will say, so far, nothing negative has come from this pairing for me personally, but I don't think I'm getting too much change in the cigar. I haven't figured out yet if it's a flavor I'm just not ready for, or if it's something that the cigar is lending to it, that it's amplifying.
So let me ask you this because I just took my first puff and I noticed something. Do you notice at least a difference from the last pairing we did, the
Oh,
cigar?
yes, definitely. I
Yeah,
think
because go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that last one, whatever that flavor was that it gave to me, it was like that creamy, like I said jelly on toast. Maybe that one, maybe it was a little bit less jelly, a little bit more toast. But with this, I'm getting back to just the light bready note and the spiciness, not so much of that added desserty flavor I had.
Yeah, yep, definitely. And I think what I'm getting out of it now is a major wood note. Like I'm getting a lot of not like a cedary note. It is more of that kind of burnt stave. I think that just all over my palate right now is that kind of charred wood um flavor. And it's coming all out of this cigar. And then when I went back to the makers, I think it was escalated as well. The staves that I was getting. So because I think the smokiness is really bringing it out.
Hmm.
I think this is a complementary pairing. I think both of them are just being kind of drawn up and enhanced, kind of like amplifying that wood flavor in both.
I for sure, and maybe this is because I know the makers better than I know the cigar, for sure see that amplification in the makers.
Yep.
It's got almost a little bit of a dark fruitiness and just that wood, the charred wood, brown sugar, woody flavor. If you drink bourbon, you know what I'm talking about. It's there, stronger than it was before, for sure.
Hmm. Well, this was interesting. I can't say I thought this one was going to go that way. I should have seen it coming with the staves, I suppose, but the cigar threw me off a little bit. Like we said, it's so different from the first time. Just like night and day from that first pairing and what you're getting off of the puffs of the cigar.
Big time. I would say there's two different palate preferences for these two different pairings. Like if you want the more desserty bakery, that first pairing, that Morris. If you want the more woody kind of I can't think of a good descriptor aside from like burly, like I don't know, gruff, that
Yeah.
type of a flavor combo. That's what it's reminding me of.
Yeah, almost like just the burnt. I keep getting like burnt wood in my head, like that burnt wood is over and over. Which naturally, you're burning tobacco, burnt wood. It's got to be pretty close in general already.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that one was very interesting.
What I loved about it was how different the cigar was between the two pairings. I mean, I'm shocked. I don't know that I've had two different pairings before create such a difference in flavor for me personally. And maybe it's because I'm
Right.
still getting better at tasting cigars. But wow.
Yeah. And that's the fun part that I love about pairings coming from the cigar first. I love seeing what different whiskeys, wines, tequilas, beers, whatever it is, do to the cigar and finding those little intricacies in a pairing where I'm like, how did that just happen? Where did that come from? Like, I would say if I had to just smoke this cigar in general and be like, all right, I'm going to find a good pairing, I would have picked this 46 probably. I think I would have been able to see it, but the Morris I would have never seen, and that got the greatest just flavor bomb of fruitiness, like we were talking about on the palate. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'd agree with you.
definitely. That's why that was a last minute sub. I was really excited to see what it was going to do. So I'm glad I went with it, you know.
All right, here is a quick cigar 101 note.
Oh, all
Okay,
right.
so my ash is getting about an inch long, which, like I said, look at that burn line. Which, for those of you out there coming from the whiskey world, a burn line is incredibly important because it means the construction is done well. If you have ever had a cigar before and you've had one side just burning all the way down one side, there's nothing more annoying. There's two things that most often it is actually user error. I'll admit that is typically the thing. It's when you lit your cigar, you torched one side of the foot and not the other one. So
Mm-hmm.
naturally, one side's burning, one's not. So you need to make sure your foot's all the way lit too. There's a little bonus tip. But typically, this is right about where you want to ash. You can hold it all you want. I held a ridiculous ash the other day. I smoked a 10 by 100 cigar. And oh my gosh, it took me like 4 hours or
Oh
something. It
my
was, it
gosh.
was, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to post it tomorrow. Those of you that follow Dreamer Cigars, you probably have already seen it. But on this time of recording, it's going to be coming out tomorrow. So hopefully I go viral or something, because that was not worth it if it gets no views because it was crazy. Um, but,
Right.
anyways, when you're ashing a cigar, okay, what you don't want to do is bang it against your ashtray. What can happen typically is your cigar, the wrapper of your cigar is very delicate. If you're banging it, it's going to have maybe
No audio.
we're back.
Now you're back. Yep. So the
I
last
forgot to turn on my stupid do not disturb.
no worries. Just for the editing, the last thing I heard was it's gonna have maybe, and then you cut out. So
Oh,
wherever
some
you were
micro
headed from
tears.
there.
Yep. All right. It's going to have maybe some micro tears that you can't see, and that along the cigar while you're smoking it, it's going to start to unravel on you. And I'm sure a lot of people have had it. I've had it plenty of times where the cigar, that wrapper just comes all the way undone, and you're like, man, this cigar is terrible. What happened? Well, you banged it against the ashtray a couple times, probably, because once you ash the first time, you just have a tendency to keep going. And that's probably what happened. Now, if you didn't do that and it unraveled, yeah, it's probably not a great cigar.
Yeah.
So, proper way to ash is right on that tip of the ash, just roll it off. And
Okay.
then, if you did it correctly and it was a good construction, you should be able to literally pick up the ash.
Nice.
So there you go.
Yeah, there's two things I wanted to remember to say to that because you brought up a couple of really good points. The first being the burn line. For those who are watching the video version and paying attention to what I've been doing, I messed up the initial light pretty bad just because I am really getting used to lighting something with a microphone in front of my face.
Yeah.
But the burn line evened out pretty well. There's a little spot right there. But
Did you
aside
do
from
any
that,
correction?
just in the beginning, I tried, but it was still really bad. And I remember I was like, let's just see what happens. Let's let it go. And it self-corrected pretty nicely. I had like a wave pattern. I had like
Mm.
divot, peak going around it. And now you can see it's correct. It smoothed itself out pretty nicely.
And that is a sign of a very, very well constructed cigar. And the reason why that's important, you can go so deep into this, but in essence, it's they're working with the right factory where where they're making the cigars. Because if you're working with the wrong factory, if you have bad construction, you never know. Maybe they're skimping on other things, on the aging process, the fermentation process. And if they're skimping on the fermentation process, there's going to be some ammonia in that tobacco and you're going to get sick. So a lot of people think, hey, because, somebody that doesn't smoke cigars very often, they go try and find the cheapest cigar they can find
Mm-hmm.
and they grab it and then they smoke a cigar and they're like, dude, I puked my guts out. Like, why did I puke my guts out? I'm like, well, what cigar did you smoke? Because on occasion, you buy something so cheap. Not It's not always true. There are people that make cheap cigars that are still very, very well constructed and everything. Um, but maybe that cigar company skipped on the kind of fermentation process to get, maybe they were behind in their inventory, so they wanted to rush it or whatever it might have been. So it's got a little ammonia in there, and naturally you're going to get sick.
I truly did not know that. I can think off the top of my head of two different occasions that I smoked a cigar kind of quick and I was like, I didn't know if it was I wasn't ready for the nicotine, which maybe it once again, and maybe it still could be,
Yeah,
but it was
definitely.
like a knot in my stomach. It was like, I don't want to eat anything. I just want to go to bed right now. Like I did
Yeah.
not feel right.
Yeah. And the other side is too, everybody talks about a bad draw, but too good of a draw is also not a good thing. Because if you're just puffing on it and it's just and it's too easy, you're going to be accidentally inhaling just a little bit, and over time that's going to upset your stomach.
Another thing I never even thought of.
Just
Geez.
tossing them out here, man. I'm here all night.
Hey, the other thing, yeah, and I wanted to touch on this for my whiskey lovers who are like, what does he mean 10 by 100? Why is that impressive? That's what you said, right? 10 by 100
Hmm.
cigar?
Oh yeah,
So that's like, if I'm picturing it correctly, the size of a breadstick probably from Olive Garden. Like that's a big cigar.
I have the box right here.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
This
That's
was for
insane.
one cigar, mind you.
That is
Literally, that's the
insane.
size compared to my head. There it is,
So
taller
you're
than my head.
talking bigger than an inch or no, is that yeah, no, that's bigger than an inch around, almost an inch and a half around.
Yeah,
And then oh wow, yeah. And
I
then
mean
10
an
inches long.
inch. So a ring gauge is the hundred part of that. Just so everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
A ring gauge is measured in 1/60th of an inch. So a 60 ring gauge is an inch. So it's 100. So yeah, 120 would be 2 inches thick. It was pretty close. And then 10, whatever the first number is, like this is a 5 by 64, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a little bit bigger than an inch, which I feel like makes sense. Um, but the five is the inches. So they leave that one simple. Why they chose 1/60th of a inch, I'm like, what? That is just,
I
like
feel like
why?
I've heard 64ths of an inch, but I could be mistaken because I
No,
could be
no, no.
thinking.
That is it. Yes,
Okay,
my bad.
okay.
It's 64. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, and that's what I was thinking in my head. I was like, wait, I thought this was a 64, but I did also think it was an inch. Yes, this is a
Okay.
5 by 64. Now I'm thinking it's a 6 by 64. This stupid. Now, now I'm all lost. But, anyways,
Numbers are hard.
Yes. That was a 10. So 10 inches long, almost 2 inches thick.
That is
4 hours.
insane. That is
It was
insane.
ridiculous. Maybe we'll put up a little clip of me smoking it or whatever in this little
Good
for
idea.
everybody on the visuals. But let's get into this Russell's if you're ready.
I am ready. I actually decided to try it a little bit so I would know what I was ready to say. So I did dive into it a little bit. But for those who are listening who don't know what Russell's Reserve is, this is Russell's Reserve 10 year. This is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. This comes from the Wild Turkey Distillery. So you might have heard of Wild Turkey 101.
Oh
This is just a slightly higher end bottle than the Wild Turkey 101. This is 10 years old. It's got more age to it, got a little bit more oomph to it. And it usually has a pretty spicy, dark fruit, oaky profile. I would say this veers off from most bourbons that I've had in that it has more of the fruitiness and a little bit more of the spiciness as well. Um, so I did form a little bit of an opinion of what was happening with the cigar. And so far for me, the cigar's standing strong. The cigar still tastes like the cigar. It tastes like those first couple puffs that I was having of it. Plus, we smoked into it a little bit, so it's changed a little bit, but
yeah.
that's staying pretty strong. The bourbon for me, it still had its normal characteristics, but I think the fruity, almost like fruit juice type of a flavor was a little bit accentuated, not a ton. It wasn't like night and day for me, but it was a little bit. I'm going to try it some more and make sure I'm not crazy, but that's what I'm getting so far.
Oh boy. This is going to be a tough ranking.
Mm.
I mean, the 1 through 3 is going to be really tough. So as you were going through that, I was, sitting here being my mad scientist experimenting, right? I have no idea. I did get the oakiness on the nose that you were talking about of the other Russells, and then when I went to the FP cigar, I got a lot of that oak out of the cigar. I think it was just blending very well. Then when I went back, the oakiness was like muted almost on the Russells, and then the fruitiness that I'm like, what? There's a mystery box.
Big time. Big time. I fully agree when it comes to the Russells. It mutes that oakiness a little bit, and it's almost more like a sugary fruit. Like
Mhm.
it's not just fruit like dried fruit, it's like sugary fruit
I'm getting like
almost.
a strawberry.
That's what I was picturing is when you dice up strawberries and put sugar on them to make them taste better as a
There you
kid.
go.
That's what I'm getting.
Wow, I actually got that note too. Look at me, my palate's expanding.
Hey, we're learning. That's what we're doing here. It might look like we're having fun, but we're putting in our reps. We are learning right now.
Yeah. We're just recording it, so we can try and make money off you guys. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, so you guys can learn too. That's what
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what we meant.
meant.
That's what I meant. By the way, this is sponsored by Pampers. No.
And now an ad from our sponsors. No,
Yeah.
yeah, this is interesting. I actually
Man, this one's hard.
the first time around I wasn't too big a fan when I went back to the Russells. And I don't know if it's because I let it sit a little longer and get more of that makers off my palate, but the sugary fruitiness really cranked up the second time I went back to it.
I'd have to agree. And I think it's going back on that FP cigar. It's really pulling out that fruitiness now on the cigar. It's going a little bit more towards that Morris, the same kind of flavor that I was getting on that.
Yeah. And I do think I don't know if it's just because we're getting into the second third of the FP, but I feel like I'm getting, and maybe it's because of the whiskey. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting more body from it,
Look
more of
at
an
you
oomph.
with your terminology. I
Yeah.
like it. A little second, third action. Here
I pay attention,
we go.
Hmm.
Mm, that's delicious. Oh boy. This
I
is
will
gonna be
say,
a tough one. Go ahead.
first sip, this was my least favorite pairing. And now, like 3 or 4 sip/puffs in, it's climbing. It's it's only getting better the more I go back and forth.
I don't even know. Which is why I'm glad that I kept All three glasses. A little sip
Good
in
call.
each.
I think we're gonna have to. We're gonna have to do some looping back.
Yep. I'm going back to the Morris first.
And I do think in this episode we've talked about this and we should implement some rating here.
Mm-hmm.
And the ratings in the beginning might be a little rough. We're still learning, but I feel like since we've got 2 episodes under our belt now, we have a little bit of a best and a worst. And so we can kind of get into some 0 through 10 ratings of these pairings. 10
I'm with you
being
on that.
like the absolute, but like if you ever found a 10 pairing, you would never buy another cigar or whiskey in your life. Like that would be your
No,
go-to. So that's like almost unattainable.
just
And
peanut
then,
butter and jelly.
yeah, exactly. And then a 1 being like if you got that pairing, you would set down one of the two because you'd be like, never again am I doing this.
Yeah. I feel like my opinion is changing. I just went back when I went back to the Morris, my mind was blown. And then now I'm on the Makers.
I'm just
Man,
diving back into the Morris here.
there are such distinct flavors going on. And it's almost just a matter of what day is it? How do I feel? What am I looking for?
Truly, so far that's been my opinion. I'm going to walk back through all 3 of them here, but there's something to love about each of these pairings. And you guys have heard us say that there were some pairings we liked the individual things, we didn't like them together. You know, we're not just making this up. Each of these pairings does have something that if it's your thing, you're going to love it.
Which I will make a quick note while Chris is going back through everything. Habano is middle of the road typically as far as body strength, all this sort of stuff in the cigar world. So it can be more versatile than say a Connecticut or a Maduro, right? A Maduro may steamroll a very light whiskey. A Connecticut may get steamrolled by actually I think it may get steamrolled by all of these pairings we had today. But this Habano can be very versatile. There's lighter Habanos, there's heavier Habanos. I would say this is on the lighter end personally, but I would say maybe that's what's going on here is it's really adapting. So if you're starting from the whiskey world, maybe Habano is where you're looking for. And obviously, I think what we're saying today is we definitely recommend this FP cigar with just keep putting it up against stuff and see if you can find what doesn't work.
I'd love to do that. I would love
Yeah.
to grab some whiskeys and see what doesn't work with this. Because even we said in the beginning, we're casting a wide net. This is like, I fully expected one of these to just fall flat. Like, what
Yeah.
were we thinking? This doesn't work. I think I got my rankings. They've changed
All right.
about 100 times as I'm walking back through them, but I'm going to try my best here.
Man. Go ahead.
I think my number 3 is Maker's 46. And that is saying something because I like that pairing. I really do. But I felt like the oakiness got accentuated on both of them. And it was good. I mean, it was good. It tasted great. But what it didn't have was the dramatic change that the other 2 had. So next, I'm going to put the Russell's 10. And that might be because I'm a whiskey guy. I'm a bourbon guy. And the sugar-covered strawberries from the Russells, I've never gotten something like that from a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. No finish, no wine finish, nothing to give it that fruitiness. That was wild. So I'm more so just impressed, I think. And then I got to put the Morris at number 1. And this is a purely biased, opinionated, subjective thing right now. It was just so creamy, sweet. Even when I went back to it and tried the Morris again, it was once again creamy vanilla, creme brulee, fruity berry flavor. And that's right up my alley. It was just relaxing. It was like, I would love to just sit back and have this on my porch for sure.
Well, now this just looks bad.
Hey, disagree with me. That's what we're here for, dude.
No, it's the opposite.
Oh,
Mine's the same.
All right.
Mine's the same. And then, which is crazy because as we were going through it, I had it all set out. I said, that Maker's 46, that was so crazy. That was great. Then I had the Russells, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I was like, I think this is gonna be last, and then I was like, well, I don't really remember the Morris. Maybe that lands in the middle, so I think I got to figure it out. Went back when I went back through. That Morris was just explosions of flavor, like you were saying. Like I would sit back and drink this and smoke this cigar all day, like for
Totally.
too long until I'm just passed out in my chair.
Right.
So
I
I would have to agree with that. I think the Russells provided something interesting, which I enjoy. I'm a big guy on different. Like in the cigar world, when I look at my cigar reviews, at least I don't do reviews in terms of, 1 through 10, like we're talking about. Um, but just saying like what are my top 5 cigars of all time or something like that. I like different. I hate when you smoke a cigar and you smoke another one and they taste the same. I'm like, no, 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 no. You didn't. You got to get creative. Give me something unique. And I'm sure a lot of whiskey guys are the same way. There's so many whiskeys. Give me
Mhm.
something to remember you by.
Totally.
So that's what I was feeling with the Maker's Mark at the end. Was this is a typical pairing with whiskey and cigars, and that's why I picked it as last because not because it was bad. I did enjoy all three. Like if I could put it one one B and one C, I really would. But you can't. So Makers is number three.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if somebody gave me any of these three, I would be impressed. But if I had like this is truly to the point where if I know that I'm smoking this FP Habano just because I know it works with it, like I'm grabbing the Morris. Like
Yeah,
there's no doubt in my mind if I'm going out on my patio and having that cigar, I'm like
100%.
gotta have the Morris with it. That's how impressed I was by that pairing.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Which brings up rankings or ratings, I should say. We did our rankings, but
Yeah.
ratings. So maybe I'm not afraid to do these ratings. Here's why, because these are going to be subjective, and I want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
These are very tailored to like my
Our
palate.
palates. Yeah.
Yes, our palates. I'm not trying to be objective here. I'm letting you know what I think. I think the makers for me, we'll go through one at a time and we'll alternate that way. I'm not like biasing you every time.
Yeah, yeah.
The makers, I'm gonna call like a 5.5 because, like you said, it was good. If I was handed it, I'd be happy. But it was tasted like a cigar and whiskey pairing. It tasted like what I would expect.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go like a flat 7. Like I think again, I think it was while it was typical, it was delicious.
True.
Like you didn't freak me out, but I had a great time.
Right.
Like that's what I'm thinking. Like I didn't go home, worshiping Maker's 46 and the FP Habano, but I'm gonna say if somebody asks, I would recommend it.
That's fair. That's fair. I'll let you go first with Russell so I don't influence you at all.
All right, fair enough. Russell's I had this picked out. That is a straight 7.5 for me. I think again a very similar kind of thought in terms of I would recommend it, but knowing kind of now the full range and with what this pairing with this cigar could be in the Morris, I can't put it any higher than that. I'm not going to say that it was anything like absolutely crazy in the flavors or just beautifully orchestrated together. So I'm gonna go 7.5, mostly because the Russells didn't change enough for me.
Okay. I'm pretty close to where you are with that one. I was thinking about a 7.2. I'm gonna put an asterisk that I think you have to be you have to be intermediate with cigars and or bourbon for that one because that was a lot of
Agreed.
body.
Yep.
I think if you sat with it too long, especially if you were newer, it would start to bog down your palate a little bit. But I totally agree. It was super good. It gave me that weird strawberry flavor that I'm not used to. I'm a big fan of uniqueness. And that's one that if the Morris wasn't around, like if I'm having this cigar, I'm like Russell's 10 year. That's a great pairing. So I'm sticking with 7.2, I think.
I like it. Well, since we're switching off, I'll let you do the Morris, but I definitely got mine picked.
Oh, this
You
is
want me to go
where
first?
I'll go. Yeah, you go first. You go first. I'll explain. Let me explain why I'm nervous. I'm nervous because I want to rate it really high, and then if we start getting really even better pairings, like because this is episode 3, then I'm gonna be
Right.
like, oh, I rated that Morris too high, but I want to go pretty high with it. But I'll let you go first.
Well, yeah, and here's where I'll say it's fair because I have done a lot of pairings, um, and I kind of know the range that I've seen. This Morris is a 9.3.
Ooh,
I'm giving it a 9.3. For me, anything above 9, this is the way I kind of always have looked at ratings. Anything above 9 is I would always pick it up. There is not a hesitation at all. Like the Russells, there might be like, oh well, I could probably find a better one. But if I'm in a lounge and I grab this FP and I'm looking at, what their selection is and I see the Morris, done. I'm picking it. I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. That's the one. Pour me that. And I'm gonna be in a coma here in a second.
I like that philosophy. Okay, if that's our litmus test, there is, are you grabbing it without hesitation? I was thinking 8.8. I'm gonna bump up to 9.1 because that it is in that range for me, for sure. Like I said, if I'm having this cigar and I see Morris, it's in reaching distance, I'm grabbing it for sure.
Bingo. Man, this was a great episode.
Yeah.
Shoo. Now I just need to go after this episode. After we turn it off, I'm gonna go pour me some more of this Morris and just let the night roll where it rolls.
Yes. I will be having this cigar with a big glass of Morris in the very near future. I can guarantee that.
Love it. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in for this third episode of the Perfect Pairing Podcast. Of course, if you have not subscribed to the Perfect Pairing Club yet, where you guys can get these cigars and enjoy them along with us with whatever you've got in your cabinet, and eventually maybe we'll add you guys in a little live stream. But for now, you can definitely comment on this video and let us know what you were pairing, shout, or DM Chris, DM me, go all over the comments, all this sort of stuff. Just communicate with us what you were doing, what you enjoyed, what you didn't, your own ratings, all that sort of stuff. Because we want this to be a community thing. Obviously, everyone's palate is a little bit different. So Chris and I are going to have certain things, and somebody's going to pop in here and say, guys, that Morris was terrible. I'm doing a 4.2. What's wrong with you? And we're going to go, man, whatever. 9.3. That's all I got to
Yep.
say.
Couldn't say it better.
Love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Chris, I'll see you on the next one.
See you in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.